Believe it or not, the library job market in the US is extra competitive. I get asked at least once a month, sometimes more than that, if we have any jobs available. And I love that people want to work in this industry. This is one I picked for myself and I love it, and I'm gonna stay in it probably for the rest of my life. But what these people sometimes don't know is that there's a very specific process you have to go through if you want to get a library job. So today we're gonna cover that. My name is Anna. I'm a librarian, a writer, and a crafter. I got my first library job 11 years ago, and since then I worked in 4 different library systems, one of which was a school library and the other 3 were public libraries. And within those systems, I held 6 different titles, so I have been through at least 6 successful interviews. I also had a couple of unsuccessful interviews, but I feel confident that I know how this process works, and so I want to tell you all about it. The first question you will want to ask yourself is what kind of a job you want to get at the library. There are some paid options and there are some unpaid options, such as being a volunteer. Today I'm going to cover the paid options just because I assume that that's what you're interested in getting. Within the paid category, there are 2 different types. There are paraprofessional jobs and there are professional jobs. So paraprofessional jobs are jobs that don't require a degree in library and information science. These are jobs like a page or a library assistant. Sometimes it's something called a library associate. It can also be a substitute library assistant. The professional category has something like a librarian, a branch manager, the library director, things like that. Usually these are the titles that will require master's degree in library and information science. I say usually because this is not always the case, and so this leads us to our second question, which is what specific libraries are you applying to? A 10-branch library system somewhere in the city or in the suburbs will be very different from the only library in a small rural town. I have met people who were library directors without even having their masters in library and information science, but this is not how it usually goes if we talk about larger systems, and this is where most of my experience is from, so that is what I'm going to be talking about. So what is the process when it comes to getting a library job? Most of the time, walking through the door and asking if they have a job is not going to help, because this is not how it works. It is going to help in the sense that the librarians or the library staff will direct you to the platform through which you will apply, but it's not the same in my experience as walking into a store or a restaurant and asking for a paper application. So where do you search for library jobs? One of the things you can do, which is going to be the easiest route, is to Google library jobs near me or librarian jobs near me, and this will probably aggregate information from multiple websites and you will see the listings, but once you click on them, this will redirect you to the actual site through which you will apply. Another option is just to go to government jobs, because this will be the website where most of those jobs are listed, and you can also just go to your county website, because library is one of the departments of the county government, right? So they will have the positions listed there as well. If they don't have any positions listed, it means none are open right now. Next topic we're going to talk about is your skills and background. I feel like when it comes to skills and background, people either underestimate their abilities or they overestimate them. For example, for paraprofessional jobs such as library assistant, you don't have to have a degree, right? So a lot of people get scared thinking, oh, you gotta have a degree, you gotta have some education in that. No, you don't. Most of the time, some customer service experience is more than enough. It's actually preferable because that is going to be the bulk of your job. You're going to be assisting people, right? It's in the job title, library assistant. So if you have experience helping people, that's already a great tick in the column of hired. Ideally, you would also have some volunteer experience at the library so that people who are on the hiring panel know that you understand what this job is about, you understand kind of what kind of processes happen behind the closed doors in the library and just in general how it all works. But sometimes you can get a job without even having any experience, because it is kind of like an entry-level position. Another thing you will need being a library assistant is being personable, right? Because you're helping people, you're chatting with people. So if you're a very introverted person, this might be a little bit difficult because you will be on desk a lot, you will be helping people, you'll be answering the phone, you'll be handling people who are not happy. So all of these things, it's great if you have some personal skills. And then when it comes to professional jobs such as a librarian or any positions higher than that, which also require you to be a librarian, then you definitely want to make sure you read the required qualifications, because it will be most likely required that you have your MLS or MLIS, which is Masters of Library Science or Masters of Library and Information Science degrees. If you don't have a degree and you apply for that, your application is just not going to go through the first round of screening, which is probably done automatically. It just checks if your application has those words in it or this qualification listed. So it would be just a waste of time to apply for that. But if you do have your degree, then that's where you start the process of reading through the job listing and figuring out what else you might need on top of that. One thing to remember about your MLIS or MLS is that you want to get it from an accredited school. The school will be accredited by ALA, which is American Library Association. So you want to have that because most job listings will say MLIS degree from an accredited library school. There might be some maybe smaller schools which are not accredited by ALA, or maybe they didn't fulfill some requirements and they lost their accreditation. You don't want to go to a school like that. You want to get your degree from one that is accredited. Accredited doesn't mean it's more expensive. There are some very affordable options when it comes to getting your master's in library and information science. I personally just Googled list of the accredited schools, and I Googled them and I checked and I compared how much it's going to cost me to get my master's degree, and I went with the cheapest option. It doesn't really matter. Nobody's going to judge you for being in the cheapest university or whatever. The main thing is you got your degree, you got this piece of paper. The fact that your course was accredited means it had all the required subjects covered, and that is all they care about. Now, even though I say that sometimes maybe people get hired without any library experience, I still want to highlight the importance of getting some library experience. And the best way to do that is to become a volunteer. Now, your situation might be difficult or different. It's possible you cannot waste any time and you need a paying job right away. So in this regard, I was blessed because I was able to volunteer a little bit and I didn't have to make any money. I could rely on my husband, and it helped me because once I started volunteering, I started basically working with people in that library. And as I was working, they were able to assess my personality, my skills, the level of English, because they probably hear I'm not a native speaker, but they could tell that I'm able to handle everything in the library. They were able to see how was my work ethic? Was I lazy? Did I just do the bare minimum and I left? Or did I ask for more work? Based on that, they were able to come to the conclusion that they would like a person like that working with them. So when the time came for them to fill a position, I was one of the candidates and I ended up being the preferred candidate. That's why they say get your foot in the door if you can, right? Even if you do have another job, you are dreaming of getting a library job, but you have another job and you only have maybe evening as your possible volunteering time, I would still recommend trying to get a volunteering position because this is really helpful when it comes to your interview. Even if they don't take into consideration your personality and your work ethic, which I'm sure they do, because even things like showing up to your shift on time, doing the whatever you were asked to do, understanding the directions, things like that, I'm sure people remember if you did a good job or not. But even if they don't take it into consideration at all, it's still something you can put on your resume. It's still something that will make you stand out and that might give you an extra edge over those candidates who never had any library experience at all. Okay, and now for the last part of this video, we're gonna actually read and analyze a couple of library job postings and talk about how you read the job listing, because the job listing actually includes a lot of very important information that will prepare you for the interview. Right, so I printed out a couple of job listings. I'm gonna show them to you on the screen so that you can follow along, but don't mind me if I'm looking down because I'm looking at my printout, and we're gonna analyze them together. So let's start with the librarian position listing. Okay, so we have this librarian 1 position in San Francisco. It's a full-time job. Salary is given the way it's normally given as a range because you don't know exactly how much they're going to offer. They're going to offer depending on your experience and your qualifications and stuff like that. And then it says San Francisco is a vibrant and dynamic city on the forefront of economic growth and innovation, urban development, arts, and entertainment, as well as social issues and change. From that beginning, I can already tell you some of the questions they might ask you. If you see things like that, this information is included for some reason. So always be prepared to use any and all information they give you in the job listing as a potential base for the questions they're going to ask you. Give an example of a program you're going to do that's going to reflect on San Francisco population as one in a quickly developing urban setting where the social issues are important, something like that. So just be prepared for that. Here's another bit, right? So the city is committed to heighten the quality of life for the diverse population of San Francisco. Again, give an example of working with a diverse population. What did you do to make sure the library services you provide reflect on the diversity of the community you are serving? Another bit about shaping the future. How do you see library programs develop in the next 5 years? Give an example, right? I'm not saying that's what they're gonna ask, but just based on my experience, whatever you see in the job listing is whatever you're gonna get. So here they say it's the beginning level professional librarian work. That is pretty standard, right? This is something a library assistant would do as well. They just want to make sure you will be able to help people with using the library. Recommend library materials to be purchased, repaired, or weeded. Decide whether weeded materials should be discarded or selected for community redistribution. So that is more of a librarian type of a task. So sometimes library assistants will also work on that. But in terms of recommendations, usually a little more librarian level. But then again, different systems have very different ideas of how much they want to separate different levels of work. So I worked in a system where it was very strict. If you're a library assistant, you only do this and you are not allowed to do the projects that are more librarian level work. And other library systems I worked at are ones that encourage everybody's full participation, and it doesn't really matter what job title you have, whether you're a library assistant or a librarian, you're encouraged to do the best in your job, and you're encouraged to learn things and to do things technically above your pay grade level if you would like to, right? So obviously you're required to do things on your level, but if you are interested in learning how to weed things or how to do purchasing, you are encouraged to try that. And then also there is this distinction where in smaller libraries, sometimes everything happens in-house, right? So the same person will be responsible for ordering and processing materials and circulation and programming and everything. In some places, this is more of an administration task, so they might have a separate building where there are people who are in charge of purchasing and cataloging or social media or something like that. So that's why it's very important to know exactly what type of a library you're applying for so that you know the scope of your responsibilities and you know potentially what you might be able to do. If your passion is cataloging and you are getting into a branch role which doesn't include any cataloging, then you won't be able to fulfill your passion, right? I will be talking a little more about that in my next video. What do librarians do all day? Because it's very different and it's very interesting how different systems see the role of a librarian. So then you see this: plan, evaluate, promote, and conduct outreach programs, group visits, meet with educators, collaborate. So this is the kind of a question where they will ask you about your experience collaborating with different organizations. So think about your past experience as a librarian, or maybe even as a library assistant, if this is your entry position into the librarian world, what kind of outreach do you do, if any? When there was a preschool tour of your library, maybe you helped your children's librarian, maybe you chatted with a school librarian or a teacher and told them about an amazing program or some resource that the library offers. Then here it says catalog and classify library material, create metadata. So this is very interesting because this means that you need to know how to catalog and do this stuff. So usually there's at least one cataloging course as a part of the degree. Some people take a track in metadata and cataloging. Some people take a track in archives. I did a track in children's services because originally I wanted to be a children's librarian. So this will depend like how familiar you are with cataloging, but it looks like this job will imply that. So it's possible they're going to test you for that. Not all librarian jobs are going to require you to be able to catalog. Like I said, in systems where cataloging is a separate department, that would be a very different position and you might not have to worry about that at all. Participate in maintaining a welcoming, safe, and orderly atmosphere. So that is a question. How do you handle conflict? How do you handle difficult situations in the library? Tell us about a time when you had an upset patron. How did you handle that? What did you do to make sure the patron was happy with the library? So these are the scenarios they might ask you to check how you handle stress. Important and essential knowledges, they say you need to know modern library methods, procedures, and techniques, knowledge of the role of a public library in the community. So that aims at weeding out candidates who still think of a library in those archaic terms, like a quiet place where everybody needs to be quiet, and it can get too busy or too crazy with kids, or because libraries these days are not like that. The libraries have evolved, and they had to evolve, right? Because the libraries are serving the community, and what the community needs is changing, right? As we're moving more to ebooks and just online life in general, the role of the library as the place where you get access to books is lower. It's still there, but it's lower. And the role of the library as the third place, as the place where people meet, where people work, where people study, where people bring kids to spend time. So the role of the library as this new community center in a way, which is not quite like the community center because we have community centers, right? So we still want to enrich the lives of our community, teach them something, help them learn a new skill, help them learn a new language, help them apply for a job, like all sorts of things that other county departments are not gonna do. But it's important to know that this is how the libraries operate today, and they're gonna change as we go, because the library is always the reflection of the community's needs, or it should strive to be, right? And so if a person comes in without knowing that, they might be honestly just shocked by the way the libraries are, right? So if you loved your libraries, I don't know, as a young person in 20 years ago, libraries were quiet, and that's how you remember them, and you never stepped into a library since then, and you have no idea what the libraries are like right now, people who will be interviewing you will be able to figure that out, and they will be able to see that you don't know what the libraries are like today, which means you probably will not be able to fulfill your role successfully. These are all the same things, right? You need to be personable, you need to be nice, you need to be able to work with different people. We have a very polarized society right now, so you need to be able to work with different people with different opinions, different community groups. Maybe you don't agree with them. Maybe you have two organizations and they're on the completely different sides of the political spectrum. You need to be able to work with all of these people. So that is something you will definitely want to highlight as you answer your interview questions. As we go here, minimum qualification, possession of a master's degree in library information science from a college or university program accredited by the American Library Association. So this is what we talked about, right? They want you to have a degree and they want you to have it from an accredited school. And then they have special conditions, which is very interesting. Fluency in a variety of languages, depending upon the department's bilingual needs. So they gonna do a test to check if you're really proficient. For example, I speak Russian and English, so in that case, if they have a large Russian speaking population, they might be interested in me since I will be able to talk to people in different languages. But what's interesting about this job is that they actually check your proficiency, because very often, I had this question on the application before and I would just mark that I'm proficient in Russian, but nobody ever tested me for that. But they also want somebody who has graduate level coursework and experience performing the duties of a children's or youth services librarian, which I did, but that's a specific track. And then they need an archivist and cataloging. So I wonder if that all applies to the same position. I kind of doubt that, because archivist and librarian would be very different from a children's librarian, which will be different from a cataloging librarian. So what I assume is going on here is that they have multiple positions that are open or can be open, in the near future. So depending on the specific field, they would prefer you to have these qualifications. And then they say college level coursework in working with people with disabilities, and then you have to have a driver's license. They're giving you a heads up that the work schedule might be irregular, right? So if you do know that you can only do a day job and you cannot ever work on a weekend or in the evening, it means this job is not going to be good for you, because library jobs, most of them, if not all, require some mix of shifts. So you will have to work an occasional evening. Usually it's like 1 or 2 evenings a week, depending on the library system. Usually also weekends are spread out between different staff, so that maybe you won't work every weekend, but you might work every second weekend or every third weekend or once in a month. But there will definitely be some weird hours like that, so be prepared that that's going to be your lifestyle. For example, I have one day when I work till 9 or even a little bit later, and I come home at like 9:30 and my child is already sleeping, and I will only see them in the morning. So take it into consideration when you're thinking about a library job. This one has a lot of information, right? So here you will know for sure that they will be testing you for things. You can also tell kind of what they're going to ask you, right? So you need to have some information about what San Francisco is like as a city. What kind of problems do they have? What kind of advantages do they have? What are their libraries like? So you want to go to multiple branches, just spend some time there, observe what's going on. Definitely go to their website, see what they have there, see what events they are doing, what programs they are offering, see their rules, see their policies, maybe even try to read some community reports and see if there's anything maybe people think they're lacking or they want to work on in the future, things like that. So it doesn't mean you have to be prepared 100% for every single question they're going to ask you, because the chances are they will be asking you some questions you were not prepared for. But the chances of you getting a job are going to increase dramatically if you really go through this application word by word and find all the keywords and all the little tidbits of information they're going to tell you how to prepare. It also helps you with your resume. When you're tailoring it, those keywords are the keywords you want to include in your resume. So if the system is using an automatic program to run through the resumes before a human ever takes a look at them, you want to utilize it, and you want to make sure your resume passes this first stage of weeding out the candidates by having the right keywords. All right, so that's gonna be it. I feel like I rambled a lot, but I think it's helpful to see how the job listing actually corresponds to the questions they might ask you and how you should prepare. No matter what your experience is, I'm sure there is something in your background that can help you relate to the questions they're going to ask. One thing you also want to think about is what questions you will be asking them, because after they will ask all their questions, they will probably ask, do you have any questions for us? And if at this moment you decide to say, no, I'm fine, bye, then they think, oh, this person hasn't thought seriously about this job and they haven't considered what the job actually is, because if they did, they would definitely have some questions. This will tell them that you have genuine interest in this position and you're already thinking how you can be helpful to their organization, which they're gonna appreciate. When I was getting my most recent position, I asked, do you see the person in this position do something specific that maybe we haven't talked about yet? And the hiring manager told me that yes, they were looking for somebody who would take on maybe the role of the ESOL coordinator, so somebody who takes care of programs for English learners. And this was an opportunity for me to tell them that yes, actually I haven't mentioned that, but I do love to teach English and I do have interest in helping immigrants because I'm an immigrant myself, and I see other friends and family around me who have trouble integrating into American life. So I'm very passionate about that. I'm sure this answer, since they were looking for that kind of a person, really made my manager optimistic about me, and that was probably the reason why I got the job, right? So you never know what quality or what experience they might really value. So you want to make sure you prepare well, but also that you have those questions in the end. So if they do start talking about something that they really want to see in this person, you have an opportunity to market that you have a background in this, or that you have a very high interest in that, and that will definitely help you stand out. That is going to be it for today's video. Thank you so much for staying with me and thinking about how to get a library job and looking through those job listings. If you have any questions about getting a library job, or maybe the interviewing process, or maybe you want to get some information I haven't covered, please feel free to leave a comment. Also give this video a like if it was helpful at all, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!